Today, I have Chuck Inglefield with me. He's a wealth advisor in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he specializes working with retirees to create a rising investment income that they will not outlive. He is the author of Holy Cow, You're Retiring, which provides valuable insights how to navigate challenging investment markets. Chuck, thanks for being on today. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. And Andre, thanks for asking me. Appreciate it.
Um, the reason I've asked you on today is for a very important topic. So, as for the listeners, I think you've kind of noticed a little bit of a trend of mental health being very important. Um, Chuck and I, we know each other through Strategic Coach. We're in the same coaching group, or one of those same coaching groups. And we were on a COVID call. Well, sorry, it was during COVID, one of the workshops. And at the end of usually you're a quiet, reserved guy. You don't say much, but when you do say something, it's profound. And this time, you came out and opened up about your depression, and that you seeked help, and then it changed your life. And you really put the onus on everyone to say, "Hey, we're not immune. We all suffer it, and just pick up your pants and just get help." Um, and the way you did it, and the type of person that everyone knows you are, like, I thought it was one of the most courageous things I've ever seen someone do, and especially in a group of entrepreneurs, high achieving entrepreneurs who are good at everything. Um, and especially you've known them for a long time. To me, it came out as a complete blindside that you
Mhm.
suffered the depression. But the thing is, we need more Chucks like out here that goes out and seek help and speaks about it. And that's why I got him here today, is to share his story about depression, his seeking for the treatments, and how it affects business, family, and life. Like, I'm just going to let you start, Chuck, and that's why I brought you on. Depression is real. The ADHD brain is more has more of a proclivity to, I don't know if that's the right word, but we're higher susceptible to depression or depressive moods. And I think this is very important to know when we need help.
Right, right. I agree, and I think it's so important. And I'll explain why I talked about that depression in that particular workshop. It was our first workshop back in person after COVID, and the tone of that workshop was not what it was pre-COVID. And you saw a number of people that had been affected and maybe weren't
Mhm.
the same person they were before. And then somebody in the workshop actually said to the group, and it was the end of the day, I remember, said, guys, I'm really struggling. I'm just really struggling. And that, hit me straight on. Is like, wow, I recognize that. I've been there, and I know exactly what that person is feeling and going through. And I found my way out of that. And depression. And I should start by saying, I'm not a doctor, and I'm surely not an expert on depression itself. I can really only share my experience and hope that it helps others. But depression is often misunderstood as just a general sadness and snap out of it, and that's not what it is. There's a lot more to it clinically. That there's um, they've talked about the two things that have helped most in the studies are therapy and medication.
Mhm.
And medication is, to me, a key piece of that, because there is something going on chemically that I guess, for lack of a better term, is somewhat of a disease that can be treated. And so when this person mentioned how much they were struggling, and I felt really bad for them. I thought, well, I was there. In fact, I was there 4 years ago, feeling exactly like this. This was pre-COVID. It had nothing to do. And the symptoms of depression are different, and probably the magnitude of these symptoms are different for different people. People
Mhm.
generally assume, hey, this is you're sad, you're just sad. And that's definitely a part of it. And as you said, snap out of it, right? And you can't snap out of it. And you have a loss of interest, you have really a loss of energy to do things. And probably the worst part of it is hopelessness. At least for me, my experience was, gosh, if it's all meaningless, why even engage? And that's where you find yourself when depression really is taken over. And the challenge with that is the lack of interest and energy works so hard against you for you to take the steps to get yourself out of it. As I mentioned, therapy and medication are the two things that can help most. But when you're depressed, you don't have the energy to go even look for a therapist. You just don't want to. You don't want to be social. You don't want to engage. Frankly, you don't want to leave the house, and often you don't want to leave the bed. And
Yeah.
that was my experience. Um, but I had reached a point where I realized that if I don't do something different, I'm going to start making some poor life decisions, right? I'm disengaging. I built this really successful business. At that point, I was, just over 20 years doing it. And I wanted to sell it. I just wanted to get rid of it, which would have been a huge mistake. And I'm part of a mastermind group. And this mastermind group that I'm in, I shared this with this small group of 7 other people. And just as this person shared in a workshop. And fortunately, in my mastermind group, we have a doctor, and that doctor was able to kind of talk to me about some of the things I didn't want to do. One of the biggest ones was medication. I had actually tried medication 20 years earlier, and the side effects were such that, frankly, I didn't want to ever try it again.
Right.
And the doctor told me they've gotten a lot better. And that is absolutely true. In fact, I listened to a podcast. I wish I remember the name of it. But it was essentially comedians with depression. And I listened to that
Oh, okay.
podcast. And maybe we can look it up and add it to the notes after the show. But I listened to that podcast and realized that, I'm not alone in my desire to not use medication. And as an entrepreneur and somebody who's driven, we want to be in control. And medication says, hey, something's wrong with me. I'm not in control. And that's not all it is. And so the doctor helped me think through that.
Well, that's a society thing too, right? It's not, if you need medication, you're not in control. If you don't
Right.
have control of your mental faculties, you're weak, you're not in control, something's
Mhm.
wrong with you.
Right.
And I'm getting that from a lot of different people who're suffering different mental health issues. And it always comes back to that is society doesn't really accept yet, as much as everyone's talking about it and put in their policies, but they still do not accept that someone says, you know what, I'm not feeling well. I need to get help for
Mhm.
my mental health. They're still being ridiculed or looked at funny.
Yeah.
So, and for you to overcome that, and medication is part of the treatment. It's not the treatment, is what I heard from you.
Correct.
Just like ADHD, there's 3 parts of the treatment. We got the medication, the therapy, and the education. I think it would be the same thing. You educated yourself on the depression as well as what I heard.
Right.
And it's not only necessarily society, but what about your immediate family? Like I think you were very fortunate to have that mastermind group, your a course entrepreneurial support group that
Mhm.
was like, okay, that's cool, man. You shared, let me help you. But what about, like, for me, it's always a challenge with family or friends. Like, did you find that hesitancy or fear of sharing that with your family and friends?
Here's where I was very lucky. My wife, Meg, knew exactly what I was struggling with and was incredibly supportive and very patient with me, in me finally deciding to be proactive about it. And again, even after talking to the mastermind group, I didn't want to go down the medication route. So I started with a therapist, and she found the therapist for me. I really didn't have the interest or the endurance to go find a therapist. I didn't know how to start. And when you suffer from depression, anything that's, seems like a normal activity to somebody who's not depressed seems like climbing a mountain to somebody who is. And
Mhm.
finding a therapist seemed like climbing a mountain. And I don't have the energy to do it. So she found a therapist. And I remember in one of our very first sessions, um, she has to learn who you are and about your life. And so I told her about the successful business that I've built, but how I don't enjoy it, how I would give it up gladly tomorrow, and not look back. And I said, but I've been successful. So I told her a friend had told me, well, you're just a high functioning depressive. And
Yes.
Well, she paused and let that hang in the air. And then she said, why would you want to be that? And she's right. Why would I want to be a high functioning depressive when I don't have to be? And so that really started the discussion of, okay, the therapy isn't getting me all the way there. It's helping me understand it, but this really is going to require probably some medication. So then the next step was Meg helped me find a good doctor. And the first time I was prescribed medication, it was from my general physician, and she really didn't understand much about depression. This particular doctor was in the behavioral health part of the hospital, fully understood it, and really interviewed me with what was my depression like? What was it? How was it affecting my life? And as we talked through it, she, I'll never forget, she sort of described what medication can do, and the medication that I was on the first time was exactly the opposite of what I should have been on. And so she prescribed one new medication, and I started to realize some improvement, but it still wasn't completely gone. And then she prescribed another medication. So there was one for depression, there was one for anxiety, and they go hand in hand.
Yep.
Right.
Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? How depression and anxiety go hand in hand?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, they feed each other in that you're anxious, which causes you to not want to engage, because if you can just avoid something that creates anxiety, then you've tackled half of that battle, right?
Right.
And so then the other half is just the fog and the loss of interest and the hopelessness. And so when we paired those two medications together, and I'm so thankful that I found her, or Meg found her, it made all the difference in the world. And let me explain what I mean by all the difference in the world in the way that the doctor explained it to me. So she drew out on a piece of paper just a wavy line, just a wavy line across a piece of paper. And there were pretty big waves. And she said, this is where you are now with your depression and anxiety. It comes and goes, and it was staying around longer than it had before. And she said, when you start this medication, your waves are just going to get smaller. You're not going to eliminate it. You're just going to reduce the impact of it. And that set the right expectation for me. The drugs don't make you happy, right? They just make you feel normal. That's a terrible way to describe that. But they make you feel like everything's okay, the way it should be.
It could be, could it also be like it just slows everything down so you're able to deal with stuff?
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it as well. I mean, especially on the anxiety side, right? Things where you used to trigger you pretty quickly and create anxiety. In my world, it created anger too.
Yeah, well, it's a side effect with men more so, right?
Yeah, and so that's just not healthy.
No.
So I was getting angry a lot. Now I would have anger episodes. They wouldn't last very long, but they were fairly intense, and I don't have those anymore. And so that was really the waves got smaller for me. And you manage your life in that way, is when you begin to feel regular, it's probably better than normal, in your mood and your anxiety. It's just a much better way to live.
So what I'm also hearing is now you've got a lot more self-awareness of depression, of your depression. So did I hear correctly? You said, like, I love that analogy or that visual of the waves. So that means low, then highs, lows and highs. So you're always going to have a wave. The waves are always there, I think, in anyone's life. But is there more self-awareness on how to manage those waves? Like for me, I get a lot of early warning systems. I'm more aware of early warning systems to prevent me from getting too far. Like one of my things, big emotional dysregulation is just immediate explosive emotion that comes out because I don't have a brain that filters things properly. But I got early warnings. I'm more aware of when the triggers are occurring before it gets too bad.
Right. Yes. I think that's That's true. You are more self-aware. In fact, with the therapist, before I started the medication, we worked out a system where I kept a daily calendar, and on days where I was depressed, I put a mark on that day. And days where I felt not depressed, um, I didn't put a mark. And I did that for 3 months. And that's what changed my attitude towards I need medication, because there were a lot more check marks than open days. And so
So it
yeah,
made it visual.
it created a visual.
Visual. Wow.
Yeah. And so you just see, wow, that, this last quarter, I was feeling depressed, 70% of the time. And so and why would you want to function like that? Well, you don't know any other way if you're not proactive about it, right? You just accept it. That's the way life is.
Well, I think that's a really, what you just said it, and this is what I've been advocating for a long time. Is like, with ADHD, pills don't teach skills, and I think that's applicable to anything: depression, anxiety, whatever, diabetes that I
Mhm.
that I have. The person has to take a proactive action to do something. And what I heard was what you did. And the only way we can get the proper management is we need to look inside of ourselves and do something. So you took an internal look. What do you think looking inside made you say, I've had enough? I gotta do something now.
It was just I don't want to feel like this anymore. And I guess it was more intense than that. So depression runs in my family. So I have immediate family members that have it. My grandfather, I never met. He committed suicide before I was born. I don't know that was depression, but it seems like it was obviously depression. And so I was always aware of that. Like, how bad could this get? Right? How bad? And unfortunately, I never reached a level where I had suicidal thoughts. Right? And that's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty extreme form of depression. But you do have periods where you say, "Gosh, I just want to go lay down and sleep for a week. I just want to disengage from the world. I just don't want to do anything." And so you're just not enjoying your life. You're not, and as an entrepreneur, you have potential and you're driven, right? And so there's that energy, but it's all missing when you're in your episode of depression, and you don't want to do anything. So yeah, when I reached that point where those days where I said, I just want to lay down and go to sleep for a week, were coming more often, I said, you know what, this has gotten bad, and it's affecting not just how I'm feeling, but how I'm thinking. And you have distorted thinking, and you could potentially make some pretty poor choices.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, man. The way you're describing what you're feeling there just now, I really starting to get the sense of what you mean by hopelessness. And the other word you used earlier was meaningless.
Mm.
Um, those are two big, powerful words that just I don't know, that hits me hard. I know I've been at the point where hopelessness, but the meaningless to me, that's tough, and then the disengaging from the world, man, like I got to give you a lot of courage and, you know, um, like kudos that you're able to push through. But I really like the point that you're making is that you were proactive and you took an active role in your treatment, not be passive and hope it got better.
Right. But I needed somebody to help me with that. If it was left up to me, I wouldn't have done it. And that's really the catch 22, I guess, with the whole situation is, you need help, you want help, but you don't have the energy, frankly, you just don't have the energy or the mindset to go out and get it. You just can't do it. It's too hard. It's just too hard.
You can't figure it out and work your way out of it, no matter what you're
Right.
doing about it.
Yeah, and that's where having others help you will make all the difference. And you've got to be able to share that with them. And fortunately, Meg knew that about me for a long time, but I wasn't at a point, because I used to just say, I'm not doing meds, I'm not doing meds, I'm not doing meds. And so she honored that. But at some point I said, well, something's got to change. And so we started with therapy. And then when, the therapist said, why would you want to be a high functioning depressive? That led to, okay, it's time to talk about medication.
Hmm.
So it's not all behavioral. I was hoping that I could solve it with behavioral, therapy, essentially say, okay, I'm just going to set these little mini goals for myself, and change it just from how I behave. And that doesn't work.
Okay, actually, that is an interesting term. It's not all behavioral. I want to expand on that, but we'll do
Mhm.
that next week.
Okay.
What I would like to point out to the listeners here, like, first of all, Chuck, thank you very much. This is such an honest, very descriptive explanation of your experiences. And again, it's courageous. And I know a lot of people need to hear this because you pointed out a lot of things that people can start saying, oh, crap, that makes sense. That makes sense. Or that really hit me. And I know people who are listening to this have taken action based on people sharing your story. So I thank you very much for that. The biggest thing, couple things. One is being proactive. You have to be proactive in your own treatment, which your treatment is therapy and medication, and also having a support circle around you. The biggest words I heard in there that really kind of got me distraught a little bit was the feeling of hopelessness turning into meaningless, and then that caused you to disengage from the world. I can't fathom that. I can't even make it up to make crap up to make it sound like I understand. I just can't. But those are, I think, three big powerful words. And then you needed people around you to help support you through this, to initiate it, to help you. And that's very important. So you need a good support circle, which includes medical, personal, and then also with yourself. So thank you very much for listening to this. We're going to continue this conversation based on It's Not All Behavioral next week. Thank you, Chuck, and we'll talk to you in a few moments.
All right.